Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this presentation session by Joe Decosmo from Innova, Careers in Analytics. I will introduce Joe briefly, and then Joe is all yours for an hour. Joe Decosmo has joined Innova as the Chief Analytics Officer in 2014. As the Chief Analytics Officer, Joe oversees a team of more than 80 data engineers and data scientists that support real-time decision-making for Innova's consumer and small business lending brands. In 2020, Joe also took on the Chief Technology Officer role, where he manages a team of more than 300 IT and software engineering professionals to deliver world-class technology and online digital experiences for Innova's customers and partners. Prior to working at Innova, Joe served as director and practice leader of advanced analytics for Chicago-based West Monroe Partners. He also held a number of executive positions at Harvey Global Solutions and the Alliant Group. Joe received a BA in economics from Lewis University and an MA in economics from the University of Illinois at Chicago. He currently serves on the board of the Chicago chapter of the American Statistical Association, the advisory board of UIC College of Business Administration. Joe is also on the board of 1 Million Degrees, a Chicago-based nonprofit that provides comprehensive support to low-income, highly motivated community college students to help them succeed in school, in work, and in life. Joe lives in the Chicago area with his wife and 2 daughters. Joe has been a great supporter of Stewart CMC. Joe has been coming to Stewart School for the past several years, and anytime we have requested him to come and speak to our students, Joe has always been here. Let's give Joe a warm welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So those of you who are here who are here early know why I'm sitting. So I'm recovering from a tennis injury. So it's better for me to sit than stand for an hour. So that's why I'm sitting here. But yeah, thank you for the introduction. I think it's been a few years since I came here because of COVID, and I think I didn't have glasses or a beard last time I was here, so you can tell time has passed. Who here knows anything about Innova International or anyone at Innova International?
Fintech company, it's all about fintech company. You deal with a lot of data you created a financial company.
Yeah. Yep. So I'll talk more about that for sure. Does anyone have any connections at Innova? No? Okay. Well, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and then, look at my my teams and connect with them as well. So, all right. Well, thank you for the intro. You heard a little bit about my my background. I've been at Innova for nine years. It's been a great run. So very, very happy. So I have 4 slides that I'm going to walk you through just to give you a sense, a little bit about the company, a little bit about the analytics organization, and then a little bit of a stylized version of how we do what we do and why data science and analytics and data is so critical to that journey. So sound good? And then we can open it up. I'm like super informal. You can interrupt me at any point. You can ask me anything you like, and then we can, turn it over to you guys after the slides too. All right. So they're not advancing. There we go. All right. So a little bit about Innova. So what it doesn't say on here is that we were founded in 2004 in Chicago. So next year we'll be celebrating 2 milestones actually. Our 20-year anniversary as a business, and 10 years in 2014 we went public. So we became an independent public company in 2014. So 2024 is going to be a big year for us for celebrations. I joined about 9 months before we went public as Chief Analytics Officer. All right, so we are, as you heard, we're a fintech company. So we are one of the original fintech companies, especially here in Chicago. So we are a digital native online lending company, and we offer online financings to consumers and small businesses. And I'll talk about our brands in a minute that we go to market with. You can see we funded about, at the end of last year, we hit $48 billion in fundings and financings to consumer and small business. So we're a pretty large operator in the space. We've served over 8 million customers. We've got 1,500 plus employees. That varies a little bit because about half of those employees are customer service representatives, contact center, et cetera. And that flexes with the season, right? There's some seasonality to our business and demand for loans, and we'll flex that team a little throughout the year. So roughly 1,500 employees. We're headquartered, 6 blocks away? 6 over on 175 West Jackson, right next to the Board of Trade building. So that's our headquarters, although now we have offices in Chicago, New York, Denver, Salt Lake City. And we used to have offices in London and Sao Paulo, but now those are remote for us. At the bottom are our 5 values. So these are values that we take very seriously at Enova and try to make sure we're operating according to our values in everything that we do. So you can see top-down teamwork, customer first, accountable for results, operate as an owner, and best answer wins. These are things that they're not just clever icons and words on a page. These have been our values for more than 15 years, and we take them very seriously. And we talk about them in meetings. We talk about best answer wins. We talk about whether something is putting the customer first or not. So we are a values driven company as well. All right. So our brands. No customer knows us as Enova International, right? Enova International is essentially a holding company, and we deliver our services through these seven brands and businesses. So on the consumer side, we have 3 lending brands. So CashNet USA, Simplique is our lending business in Brazil that we founded now, 2015 we launched Simplique in Brazil. We've been operating there ever since. NetCredit is another consumer brand of ours as well. NetCredit is really, CashNet's our oldest brand. NetCredit is really our flagship consumer brand. You may have seen TV commercials for NetCredit, online, et cetera. So both personal loans and lines of credit that we offer. Pangea, does anyone know Pangea? They're Chicago-based. They're a Chicago startup as well. So Pangea is a payments and money transfer company. So they're founded here in the city as well. We acquired them in the fall of 2020. So Pangea is not a lending business, but another consumer-focused global payments company. Their biggest markets right now are the Philippines and Mexico are their biggest markets, but they're expanding. We're expanding into many, many more countries, growing very quickly, that business as well. All right. The other side of the side, our small business side of the house. So small business lending, we offer, again, both loans and working lines of credit to small businesses here in the U.S. We do that through 3 brands as well. Our biggest brand, far and away, is OnDeck. OnDeck is another fintech that was about 10 years old, and we acquired them. They were the biggest, at the time, the biggest online small business lender prior to COVID. We acquired them in the summer of 2020. So about 6 months into the pandemic, we acquired OnDeck and instantly became the biggest online small business lender in the country as well. That's been a fantastic acquisition for us and very successful. The Business Backer is another company that we acquired in 2015. We acquired them. So they were a startup out of Cincinnati. Again, doing small business financings, online small business financings as well. And then Headway Capital is another one of our, yeah.
So in your previous slide, I saw that you lend for the people or consumers or businesses where the traditional banks doesn't usually prefer. So my question to you is, what is the criteria that you set for lending these loans, and what are there must be defaulters, right? So how do you take a track of that, and how do you manage it? How do you manage it?
So hold that question, because I'll talk about it. It's a great question. So yes, so I'll talk about what all of our businesses have in common in a minute. And then with Headway Capital, which is a line of credit product that we launched ourselves. It's a startup by Innova. We launched that in 2015 as well, and that's still one of our premier small business products as well. So Innova now is roughly, if you look at us today, we are roughly evenly split between consumer lending and small business lending, right? We're about 50-50. We are the only fintech that has that diversification here in the U.S., and certainly none of our competitors, public or private, have the scale and the reach that we do across both consumers and small business. Obviously, diversification is great, especially when you're in a kind of a uncertain, economy as well, right? So now, the one thing all of these brands have in common, and our mission at Innova, is to provide credit and make credit and financing available to essentially underserved or segments of either business or consumer that either can't or won't get funded by the big banks, right? So in the consumer space, that generally means consumers who have less than perfect credit scores, right? There's some, they fall below the credit criteria of banks, and banks, because of their reserve requirements and other policies, are unable to lend to them. And we want to service a very large segment of the U.S., anywhere from 40 to 60% of adult U.S. adult consumers fall below the credit criteria of the major banks and credit card companies, right? So we're here for those folks. On the small business side, you have the less than perfect credit small businesses, but you also have small businesses that just need relatively small financings, right? So banks in the small business space, and I owned my own business for 10 years, so I know this firsthand myself. Banks generally don't want to do any financings less than $150,000, $200,000, right? It's not worth it for a bank to go through all the underwriting, all the work with a business to lend them $50,000, right? They just won't do it. The average small business, surveys have showed us over the years, the average small business is looking for about $50,000 to $75,000 on average for credit, right? So there's a mismatch in the market. You've either folks who can't get served by the banks, and others that just don't need the amount that the banks want to lend to them, right? And so we serve that need in the small business space as well, because of the way we operate and our high leverage, low cost, low touch service. We're able to underwrite much smaller loans than what a bank would do, and do it successfully. So yeah, did you raise your hand, right? Did you? Oh no, I thought you did. Okay. So does that help you with sort of the part about the banks where we operate, where the banks aren't lending?
First, there must be certain defaulters, like for example.
Yeah. So I'm going to get to that part. Yeah.
So people who are actually defaulters, how do you take back your money? Because of course, if you're lending, you also have to receive it back. So
Yeah.
how do you do it? And when it comes to small businesses, the business is uncertain, right? In some cases. So how do you what's the criteria?
So we do it through really, really, really good data science, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing, so the thing about lending is, our goal is not to minimize defaults, right? Because how do you minimize defaults? You don't make any loans. Right.
Prediction.
The only true way to minimize not have defaults, like to have zero defaults, is to not make any loans, right? So we are not aiming. In all of our products, we don't aim to minimize defaults. What we aim for is we manage to a level of default and a level of risk that is that allows us to meet the customer's need and be profitable for us. So every business, we talk about unit economics in our business and the unit economics of each product or each brand. Every business has its different levels of default and loss targets, right? That we want to manage to. If it gets above our targets, then we start to, take some action, take some corrective action. If we're having having low losses is not necessarily good either, right? Because that means we could be making more loans. Right. So we were always aiming for a target or optimal level of default and credit loss in our businesses. Right. We're not trying to get, again, it's sort of a trick question. The only way to not have losses is to not make loans. Right. So I'm still gonna get to the rest of your question. But I want to talk about our analytics team first, and then you can open it up. So this is sort of a stylized version of our analytics organization. We have our analytics teams really fall into 4 key groups. We have the portfolio and fraud analytics team. That's the credit risk piece, right? That's the team that is making sure we have good credit models and good data science, making sure we're making good credit decisions. And then we're also combating fraud. So at the end of the day, think about what we do. We're basically an e-commerce company, and we're selling money over the internet, right? If you boil it down to what we do every day. And so there are fraudsters that are every minute of every day are trying to steal money from us, right? And so that fraud risk is inherent in the credit risk too. And so we have a team that focuses on the credit risk and a team that works right side by side with them that focuses on fraud risk and trying to that is where we do want to try to minimize fraud risk, although you never get to zero fraud, but we want to be close there.
The question regarding fraud risk. So when you started your company, when you went public, you must be having a lot of fraudulent activity. So after applying these models, what is like did it increase or decrease in the past few years?
So I wasn't here when we started the business, but anytime we start a new product or a new brand, yes, you experience fraud from day one. We try to have a minimum set of, we know now sort of that, what are the basics to watch out for. So we'll have a sort of a minimum set of fraud protection in a new business. And then as we start lending and start experiencing some of the credit loss and the fraud loss, then we start our learning and modeling, right? And we start building more and more finely tuned models and alerts for fraud and credit models, right? And so we'll typically see fraud rates go from, maybe at the start of a product, 10% of application. This is all application fraud, right? Mostly. This is people either pretending to be someone else or a synthetic identity or somehow some other stolen identity, right? We might see a 10% fraud application rate would be high, and we'll see that early on in a business. And then our aim will be to drive that down to 1 or 2% as sort of a steady state of fraud. Credit risk is different. Credit risk is changing, all the time. We seek to get it to obviously to our target levels, and that varies on the brand or product. And then we want to constantly be fine-tuning that credit model, introducing new data into that credit model, both target outcomes, new target outcomes, and new data sources. So new credit reports, new bank data, other things. Yeah. So our two credit and fraud teams are split. We have a team for consumer. That's roughly 35 people on consumer. We have a team on SMB. SMB is roughly 16 or 18 folks. We're going to add to that SMB team this year. We then have a analytic systems and platforms team. So think of this as the engineering and operations team for analytics. So because we do, the data science that we do gets deployed into production and lives in our production systems, we have which I'll talk about in a minute, we have a pretty complex way and sophisticated way of deploying and executing and monitoring those models and systems. And so this team does all that, right? So this is actually more of a data and software engineering kind of skill set than it is data science. This is data science, right? Over on the left. Then we have business intelligence and data services or data warehousing, right? So this is the team that's collecting and curating all of our data from our production systems and curating it for business use. They're developing dashboards and reports and all sorts of automations around giving our business stakeholders and partners the data that they need to run the business. So this team has evolved quite a bit over the years, and we're doing some pretty advanced things in the BI space these days too. So it's a great team as well. That team is about 18 or 20 folks. This team is 10-ish, 10 or 12. We're adding to this team this year as well, to the engineering team. Now, I've been in analytics a long time. I've run analytics teams a long time. If I rewind my career 15 years, my analytics teams would never look like this, right? We wouldn't have an engineering an operations team in analytics. This team is called model operations. I call it here systems and platforms, but we wouldn't have a model ops team. Like 15 years ago, you sort of built your model and then you handed it off to, somebody in IT to recode it into, a language like C or something else, C++, yeah, recode it from SAS or from something else into that, and then deploy it. We now own all that, right? That's all self-contained within analytics. And any company that's truly digital, that's truly data-driven and advanced in data science, if they don't have a model operations and engineering team in the analytics function, not in somewhere else, in the analytics function, that's a signal that they're really not that serious about data science and analytics. All right, and then I won't talk about the technology. Happy to answer questions about technology, but that's not the point of this.
So what like the tools and techniques and models that you use for all these analytics or BI that you said about the visualization? What are the tools and techniques that you use?
Yeah, it occurs to me, I usually have a slide in here that talks about the tools and approaches that we use, and I don't have it this time, so I'll have to just speak to it, and you'll have to take notes. You got the best way to talk about this. So I'll talk about it from like sort of the data to data science life cycle, right? So our production databases are all Postgres. So that's where the data sits for access by our applications and for our customers, right? So that when you log into your NetCredit account, you can see all your data right there and you get fast, low latency response. So Postgres is our production data database. Our analytical, so think of like OLTP, OLAP, right? So transactional processing, Postgres, analytical processing, that data then flows into Snowflake, right? And we use Snowflake, which is essentially, any familiar with Snowflake? Anybody? So Snowflake is a cloud-based, basically data warehouse in the cloud. It's sort of data warehousing on demand, if you think of it that way. So it's highly scalable. We run it in AWS. Highly scalable, very, very fast response for queries, indexing, etc. So our OLAP lives in Snowflake, right? Then on top of Snowflake, we have MicroStrategy as our primary BI and visualization layer, right? And now we run MicroStrategy in the cloud, and we're leveraging many of their newest. We're actually a pretty advanced user of long time and a pretty advanced user of MicroStrategy as well. So that's from the BI and sort of data warehousing space. As the data moves into the data science realm, so where we're building models, building and training models, executing, etc., we still leverage Snowflake, right? So we're still pulling the data from the Snowflake OLAP layer. We are generally using, Python or R as our modeling tools. Increasingly Python. We leverage SAS also, but we use SAS more as a validation, model validation exercise than for model development these days. When I was hands-on keyboard building models, I was using SAS, right, back in the day. So Python, majority Python are the types of models we build these days are generally more modern machine learning algorithms. Not every model we deploy is automatically retraining, but some are, many are. But they're generally these days gradient boosted trees for the most part. That's sort of our workhorse algorithm these days, and pretty consistently the winning algorithm when we build models. So these are fairly complex tree-based models. We spend a ton of time on feature engineering. So the work that happens really, if you think of the act of building a model, the final estimation of the algorithm is oftentimes kind of the easiest part of the project, right? Where the bulk of the work is building your data set that you're going to use, and then feature engineering, right? And trying to derive more predictive, more unique features from the underlying data that you have. And then ultimately those end up typically in some type of a boosted tree algorithm. Logistic regression, still a very heavy presence as well that we use for our credit models as well. So there's some regression, logistic regression in all cases. It's all supervised learning. We're doing very little unsupervised modeling. We have a target, right? Our target outcome is they, accepted the loan that we offered them. They paid us back or they didn't pay us back, right? They responded to this marketing offer or not, right? So there's always a target typically that we're trying to predict. Once those models are built, they then get deployed into a proprietary system. We call it Colossus. We're very proud of it, but we call it Colossus. It's a proprietary system for executing all of our models on demand and in real time, in sub-seconds, and I'll get into that in a minute. Right? That Colossus framework is built on a scientific computing language, Mathematica. If you may have heard of it, it's Wolfram. It's a Wolfram language. And then we are increasingly using SageMaker in AWS also for model execution. So I should have had a slide on that. I apologize for that. I left that out. I usually had that. I had that in the last time I came and spoke to you guys, but that gives you sort of the idea, right, of the tools. The one thing we use sort of universally across the board, I like to say I'm the chief analytics officer and we have an analytics department, but really everybody's an analyst at Enova. I mean, we're a digital e-commerce company. And so our business teams, our strategy teams, everybody is very used to pulling and analyzing data themselves. So the one tool that everybody uses, everyone has in common, you can probably guess, is SQL, right? So sort of an underlying way that folks sort of build their data sets and gather their data together and all that as well. SQL runs on Postgres, runs on Snowflake, all that. So, any questions on any of that?
So I am from this. So I want to come to opportunities for people other than finance or software developers. Like you mentioned in the last sentence that you have strategic teams and business development teams. So can you can you throw some light on those areas?
Sure. Yeah. Can we save that though? Let me come back. come back next. That's a good, just general, I think when we start talking about careers and all that, that's a great kickoff to that. So this is my last slide. And this is a really important slide, and it'll give you a sense of why data science is so mission critical to everything we do at Innova, right? So this is a very simplified version of a customer experience. This can be applied to any of our brands, whether you're a small business or a consumer applying for a personal loan or line of credit, or a small business applying for a business loan, right? So step one is you apply, right? You come to one of our websites, you fill out an application, and you tell us a little bit about yourself, your identity, who you are, give us some general financial information, bank account information, etc. So what that does, when you submit that, right, that within sub-seconds, that starts to kick off our fraud analytics, right? Because the first thing we want to do is, are you who you say you are? Right? That's number one. And then, are the things that you're telling us, does your bank account really exist? Are you really the person who has control of that bank account, right? So we run all these verifications, right? Just to make sure you're not a fraudster and trying to steal money from us, right? That happens literally in seconds, right? So you can answer right away. You survive that. Then you get to underwriting, right? Like we say, okay, we think you're legit, that you are who you say you are. Now we're going to look at your credit and decide if we want to make you a loan offer or not. This is where our credit models come into play, right? And we pull, a dozen different credit reports, right? We pull TransUnion, we pull Equifax, Experian, we pull Clarity, we pull ID Analytics, we pull specialty bureaus. There's all sorts of specialty credit reports. We pull, if you allow us, we will pull your bank statements electronically, your bank transactions, right? So you see that a lot now, right? Where you can link your bank account to some other account, and we allow you to do that because you might not have the best credit, but maybe you've got great cash flow and great cash flow in your bank account, right? And we want to look at that and want to incorporate that. So we have models that look at all this data and then apply and create a risk score, right? And that risk score basically tells us how likely we think you are to pay us back, right? And then depending on the product or the brand, there's different cutoffs, right? Like approval levels, right? Where you have to be. All these models are proprietary, built by us internally, and they are unique to the brand and the product, right? So that happens, we're pulling a dozen different external reports. We're running multiple credit models to predict, defaults at different points in time. That all happens in about 3 seconds, right? Because we want to give an answer back to that applicant as quickly as possible. We want to give a yes or a no as quickly as possible, right? We run literally hundreds of models every day. Thousands of variables go into all these models. They run every day, et cetera. So within about the first 2 steps, within about 10 seconds, we will have verified you and your account information, and we will have determined whether you're creditworthy or not, and we want to make you a loan. So assuming you pass our credit models, then we need to turn that into an offer, right? We then say, okay, given that we think you're not a fraudster and we think you're going to pay us back, now here's the offer we're willing to make you, right? We're willing to lend you $5,000 for 18 months and, et cetera. Okay. So let's say now the customer says, great, I like your loan offer. I'm going to take it. I accept your offer. I digitally sign the offer. We then do one last round of verifications, right? Because oftentimes what fraudsters will do is they'll apply with one bank account that they know is legit. And then when it's time for us to transfer the money, because we wire it electronically, transfer the money, before that, they'll change the bank account. They'll say, you know what, actually send it over to this bank account, right? So we want to make sure we want to do one final round of verifications before we fund that loan. So if it passes those final round of verifications, then we'll fund that loan. Increasingly, it's same day funding, but it's at the slowest. It would be the next day funding, wire transfer into your account. You've got the funds, or if it's a line of credit, you've got access, and then you can decide when you want to draw on that line of credit. So that's our process, and every step in this process, every decision we make in sub-seconds, every decision we make is driven by a model or a rule or some other algorithm that has been developed by our analytics teams. So this is where we know we're better than virtually all of our competitors, certainly our public competitors that we know. We know our models outperform based on what we know of our public competitors' performance data. And this is how we compete. So I interrupted you because you were going to ask another question.
My question to you was, so bank offers, of course, you are looking for people who bank does not give a loan. So then you mentioned about a certain, for example, range. So how do you choose that range that this customer is not going to be defaulted? Because of course, whoever applies for this loan might not have a good source of income. Or how do you go?
Yeah. So we verify the income. Like if you tell us you make $7,000 a month, right? We're going to verify that, right? You either send us electronically a pay stub, right, that we can verify that income, or we have ideally, you've given us access to your bank credentials, and we can look at your bank account. We can see, yep, they've got, twice a month they've got payroll deposits, and they are roughly $7,000, right? So we verify the income. We want to make sure they have the income we think they need. And then we have, again, it depends on the product. We have ratios that we aim for, right? We call them, you hear debt ratios, you hear payment to paycheck, right? So we want to have we want to be within under some ceiling of payment to paycheck. We don't want our debt repayment to be more than 10% of your stated income or verified income each month, right? Because we know if it gets higher than that, you're going to have trouble paying us back, right? And those ratios we're looking at those constantly. We'll raise or lower that payment to paycheck threshold depending on how the businesses are doing, depending on the economic environment, the macroeconomic environment, et cetera. So that's how we do that. And if we get it wrong, it's okay to get it wrong, some number of times. There are times when we run tests where we want to be wrong, right? Because we want to gather that data. Like we want to purposefully make some unprofitable loans, right? Because we want to gather that data, sort of a data collection exercise, so we can improve our models. So there's some of that, but those are the kind of things we're looking at reviewing every month in the businesses, and then adjusting and higher or lower, optimizing all the time, right? Yeah, does that help? Yeah.
But the process that you told about us right now, you said the decisions need to be made within 10 to whatever seconds, few seconds. So isn't that like a lengthy process to follow if you want to say yes or no to someone?
Well, so you mean if I'm talking about like monthly kind of things and just or which?
Yeah, like getting their information, understanding the economic situation, whether they will be able to repay. So understanding.
Yeah, so those are things we're making as a business team, right? As an analytics and business team. So we're looking at all the performance of our products every week, every month, and then we're making recommendations to the business like, hey, defaults have started to increase a little bit in this segment. We think we should raise or lower the payment to paycheck ratio, right? So those are business decisions that we're making. That's not impacting the customer experience, right? It's just then going forward, we'll tighten or loosen that criteria, right? Verification can slow things down. So there are times if a customer is unable to give us ways to electronically verify the data they've given us, then we revert to what we call loan processing, which is a process where you provide either uploaded, scanned documents, pictures, etc., and then that goes through sort of a second flow, right? That takes longer, right? Because we're reviewing sort of more physical documents as opposed to data, right? That we can get access to. Yeah. At that point, though, that we've told the customer that they're approved and what they're approved for, and then we say we need more information, right? So send us your pay stub, send us a bank statement, send us your last 2 bank statements, right? That kind of stuff. If we can't get it electronically, right? And then it's sort of up to the customer to close those things. That's also a way we stop fraudsters. Because if we have some applications that look questionable, or we're not certain they're fraud, but we think they might be, one way you stop a fraudster is say, hey, hold on, call us at this number and verify your whatever, verify your address, verify your bank, or whatever. Because most fraudsters aren't going to do that. Because they're submitting, 1,000 applications a night and hoping that 100 of them get funded, right? That's a good night. If you get 100 application loans funded at, a couple $1,000 a piece, right? On the consumer side, that's a good night for some fraudster, right? So that's the other way we stop. If someone's in the gray area on fraud, we'll stop the application. We'll say, call us. We need to verify a few things on your application. And then most will just abandon. Yeah.
Do you give loans to students?
To students?
Yeah.
We do, as long as they have jobs. So one thing all of our borrowers have in common is they need to have jobs or a source of repeatable income, right? Could be government benefits too, but it needs to be an ongoing source of income. Yeah. I'm going over here first. Yeah.
Okay. And touching that question.
And I want to get back to your question about
about the student loans and all that. Well, and you said about a specific, like you get some funding like recurrently in your bank account. How do international banks operate with that? Because like I'm from Europe and we don't have like the same number for routing and all that. And well, since all my money is in Europe's banks, like I opened an account here.
Yeah.
So I just transfer money back and forth.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to check my background, if you check my account here, you wouldn't even give me a loan. But if you check euros, you may. So how do international banks are included in your system?
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna like my answer, right? I mean, we wouldn't approve you, right? Maybe we should, right? For international, either foreign nationals or others, we don't have a great solution for that yet. We haven't really figured out that segment.
Yeah, because you said that you have offices back in London.
We did, yeah. So we had a business. We had actually a very large business in London. We've wound that down. Yeah, so we're no longer operating in the UK. And then Brazil, we're lending to consumers in Brazil. So we're pulling, they have their bank accounts are in Brazil. It's all sort of self-contained in Brazil. Yeah.
And also like in the model things that how do you manage that identity theft? Like how do you identify that the person is who they say? Yeah, it's like some kind of deep fake identification, like multi-factor authentication. So how does it work?
Yeah, so once they're for accounts, we have multi-factor on accounts themselves. So it's a little, hard. Account takeover is difficult. In the other piece, so how we identify either stolen or synthetic identities is you're basically triangulating on a few data. You're triangulating on the physical data they provide. So they have to provide some kind of an government ID, right? And so we have both a service that we leverage as well as our own internal tools that we built to identify if an ID has been physically altered in some way, right? So we can do that. We can do that same thing for bank statements, right? Because fraudsters will create very convincing bank statements as well. So they won't give us their credentials, but they'll say, hey, they'll send a PDF or a JPEG of their bank statements, right? And fraudsters can create very, very, like humans would not catch some of these altered bank statements. And so we use some third-party tools for that, and we've developed some of our own tools for that as well to identify when we think a document has been altered in some way. And then that would be a trigger for fraud, right? And then what else did you ask me?
About the multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, so
to identify that that's the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, so that's what we use for account logins and that's once we've created an account for somebody and they've been funded. So then we have multi-factor authentication on their accounts as well. But the fraud piece. So the other question about how we identify synthetics or other fraudulent accounts. So there's sort of the altered document and ID kind of stuff. Then there's other things we look at, like for example, does the location, we use machine device fingerprinting, which helps us to say like, okay, 100 of these applications all came from the same device. That's a pretty good signal that it's a fraudster, right? Like 100 different applications, different individuals, all came from the same device fingerprint, right? That's a fraudster. So that's also how we do it. We use, there's a lot of, for the world of fraud and identity is gotten very advanced these days. And we purchase a lot of third-party scores and systems too that say, hey, we've seen like, this might be the first time we've seen this identity, but it's been flagged as fraud, 100 other times by some of these consortium kind of products as well that allow us to score whether this is a likely fraudulent ID as well, either stolen or synthetic, right? ID as well.
Yeah, I realize that also you haven't talked very much about cybersecurity and how does it play a big part in your business area. Seems like about 1,500 employees. you said that a bunch of them were like customer service and all that, and all the teams that we talked about, like there were like up to 20 people. Like I figured that you should have like a big cybersecurity team. Am I right?
Oh, we do. We do. That's under my technology box.
Yeah.
We think about, so we have a cyber team. We have an IT risk team that the like sets all the, like we have defined, you have user permissions and roles. So you can only certain people can see certain data. We have also, and that's constantly tested both internally and third party, as well. Yeah. Yeah. You can imagine cyber is a big area for us as well.
We're running out of time. However many questions you want to take.
So I can keep going. I probably can go till maybe like 10 after, and then I need to
All right.
run for, well, I can't run, but I need to make it to a train. One more question, and we need to get, because you've sort of asked the question that gets at careers.
So is Innova linked to financial institution to disburse these loans, or is it from your revenues and capital?
Yeah, so we disperse the funds ourselves. However, we do it through the U.S. has a electronic banking network, automated clearinghouse. It's basically a system that any banks and financial institutions all have access to, and it's a way to transfer funds electronically. So we use through access to the ACH network is how we disperse our funds. So
no, my question was, well, what is your source of funds to disperse?
Oh, our source of funding.
Like, are you funded by a financial institution, or are you funded by like venture capital? Or?
Yeah, no. So we're funded a few ways. So we are self-funded for much of our loans. So our turnover of our loans and revenue allows us to keep funding at a high level. We then also have we have a treasury and finance and treasury team that does various. We have a rather large line of credit that we can draw on when we need it. We have securitizations where we package up our loans and they get sold through our bank partners to our bank partners. Our bank partners like our loans very much because they perform very well, and so we do what we call securitizations, and then we have what they call warehouse facilities, which are essentially banks set up large. Think of it as, it's not a physical warehouse, but think of it as a warehouse of money, right? That we can draw on to fund our loans as well, and then we pay that warehouse back under the terms of the agreement, right? So, and then we're publicly traded. So obviously we raise money through our stock as well. But yeah, it's all those things. We're not venture capital funded. We're not private equity funded. I mean, some private equity participates in our securitizations, but we're not. They're not a principal funding for us either. Yeah.
So
last one, and then we got to get through.
So do you guys sponsor international students by any chance?
You say again?
Like, do you guys sponsor international students? Like,
do we fund internationals?
Sponsor.
Oh, sponsor. Oh, I'm sorry. We do. So we sponsor in analytics, okay, and we sponsor in technology.
Sounds good. Thank you.
As well. We'll do a little bit in some of the other areas, although it's sort of getting harder, in the non-technical areas. It's getting harder to, keep our foreign nationals, national employees. Yeah. But yes, we do. Yeah. I thought I'd be asked that at some point while I was here, so I'm glad you asked. Okay, deep breath. Do you want to restate your question?
Last month we are talking about finance. So what are the options that analytical student have as a whole, like, from the business point of view or the strategy
Yeah.
or budgeting point of view, or like what are the other options that like I don't want to I had a career in finance and now I want to move away from it
Yeah.
somewhere in business development or strategic planning. So
Yeah.
uh,
So
that in any way other than
yeah. So within so I'll a few. So what's interesting is so we're a financial technology company. Very few of us. I can say in analytics and tech, it's single digit percentage of folks that have a finance background in our areas. Because we don't care about a finance background. What we care about is you've got good quantitative skills in the analytics side, right? My A part of my title, we want you to be able to have good quantitative skills, good problem solving, the ability to sort of break down a problem into a business problem into a data problem, right? Think about it that way. Coding, right? You need to demonstrate some level of coding competency. So those are the things we look for. We don't have a target major, a target discipline that we hire for. We've increasingly hired, master's students, master's and PhD students in our analytics team. Mix of hard sciences, data science and analytics graduate programs. Very little business, right? Very little business. And if someone is a undergrad business major or an MBA, like for us, that's fine, but you need to be able to demonstrate quantitative, technical skills, technical knowledge, etc. And that's also true of our business teams, our other teams. I mean, the only team really that hires finance people is finance. We have a chief financial officer and we have a finance team. If we look at our business teams, so our we call them our P&Ls, our profit and loss centers, our business teams. Those teams are as much engineering, industrial engineering is a big area. You think about what industrial engineers do, they're all about optimization, right? So that's an area that fits very well in our world. There are MBAs there as well, but again, they need to have they're typically MBAs with some quantitative undergraduate degree, right? Yeah. So it's a whole mix. We have a pretty diverse set of backgrounds. We have history majors in my analytics team, right? Because they have really good, quantitative skills and technical skills. We have a manager in our a manager of our model operations team didn't go to college. He taught himself some programming after high school and got hired at Innova as a programmer. He's been with us 14 years and now he runs our model operations team. Right? He's got PhD data scientists reporting to him, right? And he didn't go to college, right? So it's a pretty diverse mix as well, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the great presentation on behalf of CMC and the students. Let's give Joe a round of applause.